continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Good evening and welcome to Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective, broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Catch us live on SABC Plus app at DSTV OWK channel 802 and OpenView channel 628. I am Thabiso Lohoko and I'm standing in for Tsepiso Makwetla. But then first, let's shoot straight into our top stories that had been making headlines throughout the day. In the wake of renewed conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, Doctors Without Borders is sounding the alarm over a sharp rise in sexual violence. Since the M23 AFC forces took control of Goma in January 2025, MSF has recorded a surge in cases, treating nearly 10,000 survivors in just 4 months. The humanitarian organization says that the situation remains dire, with health facilities overwhelmed and insecurity worsening across the region. MSF's deputy head of program in the DRC is Davina Hales.
So we have not seen a decrease in the number of sexual violence and survivors in North Kivu, in Goma especially, since last year. So in 2024, we recorded around 40,000 cases. In the first 4 months of this year, we've recorded 10,000 cases in Goma and Sake alone in MSF facilities. We're extremely worried and extremely concerned about the situation. The current insecurity in Goma and North Kivu is having an impact on access to healthcare for all the survivors of sexual violence in terms of accessing our services.
The World Food Programme has warned that drastic cuts to humanitarian aid in northeastern Nigeria have left more than 1 million displaced people at the mercy of militant groups. The BBC's Anne Soy has the details.
They are mostly farmers who fled from militants, abandoning their farms and homes. The World Food Programme says it has run out of money to feed them. Malnutrition rates are already soaring. The medical charity MSF says more than 600 children have died from it this year in the region. The biggest donor, the US, is urging other nations to step up. The Nigerian government has set up a board to battle malnutrition, but it's not clear if it can fill the gap.
The Democratic Alliance Party in South Africa's Gauteng province says that the city of Johannesburg is unlikely to be ready for the much anticipated G20 summit. With just 3 months left before South Africa plays host to global leaders, the DA says the service delivery failures have still not been addressed. The party's Gauteng chairperson, Solly Msimanga, questioned the effectiveness of the work of the Presidential Working Group and Bomb Squad, initiatives set up to give the city a facelift ahead of the G20 summit in November.
As councillors, they're sitting here, they don't even know, who are members of the so-called bomb squad. There is no terms of reference. There is no allocation of funding. If there is any, we don't know who's responsible for what. And yet we are going to be, in a couple of months' time, be hosting one of the biggest, events. And you can see for yourself what Johannesburg look like. Street lights are still a mess. Potholes everywhere. We still have streets that are littered. We still have, streets that have water, fresh water and sewer that is flowing.
Ukraine's parliament has voted overwhelmingly in favor of President Volodymyr Zelensky's bill to restore the independence of 2 key anti-corruption agencies. This reverses the law he introduced only last week, which provoked nationwide protests. The BBC's Simon Ponsford has the details.
Protesters who'd gathered outside Parliament in Kiev cheered as news of the vote came through. It means Ukraine's 2 anti-corruption bodies regain their independence just a week after President Zelensky introduced a law to bring them under political control. His swift U-turn followed angry street protests across Ukraine, the first since Russia's full-scale invasion began. Mr. Zelensky also heard warnings from Western allies that he must keep up his fight against corruption as Ukraine tries to join the European Union.
Myanmar's military government has declared an end to a state of emergency put in place 4.5 years ago when it ousted Aung San Suu Kyi, who's elected to government. Now, the BBC's Jonathan Head explains.
So they've renewed this state of emergency every 6 months. It's been renewed 8 times. The reason they've not renewed it this time, the last one's just expired, is because under the Constitution you can't hold an election if a state of emergency is in place. That means all this talk of an election at the end of the year is serious. The military wants to hold an election, possibly December, possibly January, despite the fact that it doesn't control a lot of the country. There's armed insurgency and a great deal of it, that a large part of the population is unlikely to take part.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
In recent weeks, East Africa has seen a disturbing rise in human rights violations. In Kenya, digital activist Rose Njeri was arrested under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act after creating a tool for citizens to oppose the Finance Bill 2025. Meanwhile, in Tanzania, Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and Ugandan lawyer Agatha Atuhaire reported being detained, tortured, and sexually assaulted by security officers.
East Africa needs a reset. We need to get back East Africa to where the founding fathers are. You know, when President Nyerere and his colleagues Jomo Kenyatta and the Ugandan counterparts fought for independence, they fought for independence to get Africans out of poverty, to get Africans out of slavery. The leaders who took up power have since gotten into regression.
Neto Agostino, co-leader of the United Green Movement Party.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. 1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Women's central role in shaping equitable economies was in the spotlight at the commemoration of the Pan-African Women's Day 2025 at the Pan-African Parliament in Midrand, Johannesburg in South Africa. The session was convened under the theme Enterprise and Redress, positioning women-led economies as instruments of reparative justice. It brought influencers and gender equality advocates to reshape the economic transformation with women at the helm. Ntantla Mahlangu reports.
The commemoration of the Pan-African Women's Day was organized by the Women's Caucus of the Pan-African Parliament in collaboration with the Circle of Global Business Women. Celebrated annually on the 31st of July, the day commemorates the establishment of the Pan-African Women's Organization in 1962 at the first Pan-African Women's Conference held in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The day honors the significant contribution of African women to liberation struggles, institution building, and the advancement of gender equality. It also highlights the ongoing fight for economic and social justice for African women on the continent and in the diaspora. Dr. Sindiswa Mzamo, president of the Circle of Global Business Women, says women should be made architects of building Africa.
When we're talking about building the Africa that we want and actually making women as architects of building that Africa that we want, what do we mean? Because we must not just talk about it, but we need to actually come to the occasion and rise to the occasion and speak to the issues of Agenda 2063 and how do we as women-led economies or women-led businesses make sure that we also contribute and to the values of Agenda 2063. Now, if you look at where we are as women globally or women in the continent, I think for me what is really important about being an architect is actually looking at playing and shaping the economies of local and national and global member states that we're talking about. Now, when you tailor it down to Africa, who are these women? Where are they? The grassroots women, for us, they're the most important women. Why I'm raising this thing? Because we are talking about agribusiness. We are talking about climate change. We are talking about small business. How do we actually shape up that agenda so that we don't leave anybody behind when we're talking about women on the grassroots?
Ayanda Mvimbi of UN Women South Africa Multi-Country Offices delivered a keynote address on how gender-responsive budgeting has been successfully used across Africa to increase women's financial power and access to markets. She highlighted how women-led businesses have gained access to corporate supply chains, secured contracts, and created jobs, thereby deepening women's roles as economic actors.
We have seen the evidence of how it has increased women's financial power because GRB has enabled to reshape financial flows and leveled playing field for women entrepreneurs. We've seen evidence of women who have been able to access big contracts, deliver on them, and were able to really increase their financial muscle as well as increase employment.
Pan-African Women's Day 2025 served as a call to action to elevate women from the margins of reparations discussions to the architects of a new economic future. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ntlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
A Kenyan court has ordered the exhumation of bodies suspected to belong to victims of yet another alleged cult-related tragedy, this time on the outskirts of Malindi in Kilifi County, the same region where over 400 bodies were recovered from the Shakahola forest last year. Prosecutors say victims may have died from the starvation and suffocation. Now, for the latest, we joined live by our correspondent, Alex Kiari. Good evening, Alex.
Good evening. How are you? And I hope your listeners are also okay. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for that, Alex. Alex, what more do we know about this new case? How did investigators discover the graves near Malindi?
Actually, this latest case is still within the same Shakahola forest, which is part of what we call the Chakama Ranch within Malindi area of Kilifi County. And it is being linked to one of the survivors of the previous case that was that emerged in March 2023, that was linked to a man called Paul Mackenzie, who then led an outfit called New Hope International Ministries, which was behind all these issues that have emerged. So it's being alleged that this man was saved from that as a survivor and then rehabilitated, then taken back home to his rural area in Western Kenya. But he recently went back to the same area near where the first case was reported. And that's where now locals discovered some graves, and then some people were already in dire straits and reported to an organization called Vocal Africa, whose leader spoke to this evening and confirmed that actually they identified initially 6 graves that are supposed to be exhumed. Before, of course, they had to get a court order to do that. That's what the court ruled on, and then now we're waiting to see when and how this is going to be happening soon.
How many bodies are believed to be buried at the site?
So initially, there were identified 6 shallow graves that were supposed to be exhumed, but according to Vocal Africa Director Khalid Hussein, he says that it's around 47 bodies that are the graves that have been identified, and the number could actually rise depending on when and how they are going to go about it. Because remember that initially during the 2023 case, around 8 sites remained untouched because up to 429 bodies are still in the mortuaries awaiting identification, and so far some of them were in really bad shape and actually barely skeletons, and this makes it very difficult for them to be identified. So they decided to halt it first, and then first after identifying the 429 bodies, then they'll proceed to the other sites that are still being still under guard as we wait for the date and when to be exhumed.
Are these deaths linked to Paul Mackenzie or a different group?
It is linked to Paul Mackenzie, but differently, because this is a former member of Paul Mackenzie's outfit who was rehabilitated and then went back there on his own, and maybe it's suspected that he could have started his own cult, whose identity still yet to be revealed, because he was also actually struggling by the time it was discovered. But so still, we believe that it's still, yes, different, but still linked to the first case, because he could have relapsed and gone back there and started his own outfit that is now being linked to the current cases that we're talking about.
What do we know about the 11 suspects under investigation?
Yeah, there's still some are being rehabilitated, and but of course we know that they're waiting to be processed by the state security agents for them to be also processed by the courts later on. But we just know that they're also being rehabilitated, especially in terms of their health, because they were really in a very bad shape. But remember that Paul Mackenzie and his team and his co-accused are still languishing in prison as their cases drag on as we wait for the outcome. And he has recently been complaining of mistreatment in the courts, and that he says that he's also being denied justice because he needs to be released on bail. But the courts have refused to grant him that wish.
Have exhumations begun, and what has been found so far?
Not really. They have not yet begun. The court just ruled and actually ordered for the exhumations to begin, but they are not yet begun so far officially. But so far, what I know is that security and health officials have gathered at the area, and they're also try to know whether these fresh graves that have just been discovered are linked to the first case. So probably by next week there'll be some progress on the same, and we'll be able to report on that as the news emerge from the area.
How is the government responding to this new development?
Largely silently, because apart from the court ruling and some here and there press statements from local junior security officials, the government has largely been quiet about it. Remember that it is being suspected that we could be talking about over 1,000 more bodies in the Chakama forest, that's Shakahola, that are waiting to be exhumed. So we know that there is a lot of information that could be kept away from the members of the public, in the knowledge that there are some 429 bodies that are still in the mortuary awaiting to be processed. And so far, there are fears that there could be foreigners involved. There is actually a white person who had been identified as part of the people who had died in that incident, in that first case. So the government has really been taking a very low-profile approach on the same, and like what we saw during the protest when the government was quite out and about over the issue.
Do you know anything about investigations, and also just give us a feel of how the people are reacting?
Actually, the locals are wondering what's going on with that, because it's a community land, and they normally lease it out to farmers, and those people want to also settle and set up businesses there. So when this news came out, most of them really wondered, because the victims were not from the local area. They came from other parts of the country. We call it up country because this place is in the coastal Kenya. So they are really wondering what's going on there, and why some particular people from a particular region, mostly in Western Kenya, are falling victim to these cults that are emerging all over the place. And remember that even Mackenzie himself is not from Western Kenya. He had settled there initially to do farming, but his followers actually followed him there. He had initially started his community TV station, which is later sold to another priest, and he had actually decided not to go on with this preaching and this radicalization thing, but his followers actually followed him there, and that's why it all happened once again. So locals are wondering what's going on in the country, and there's also that feel that churches and religious organizations need to be regulated by the state in the country. And so far, the government has introduced new tax laws that will also target the religious organizations as a way of clamping down on these radical and sectarian forms of violent approaches to religion.
Alexa, thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you very much and have a good one.
That was Nairobi correspondent Alex Chiari bringing us the latest on the disturbing case emerging from Kilifi County.
zochitika ndi madaphiri kamlondola wazochitika pena paliponse.
nduna wa zamalonda ku Malawi waletsa kampani yopanga shuga ya Irovo yomwe ndi nthambi ya Irovo Sugar Group Limited kuti isiye kutumiza shuga ku maiko akunja. Malingana ndi nduna ya zamalonda Vitumbuko Mumba, izi zithandiza kuti shuga yemwe yakusowa pa msika azipezeka. Ndiye pano ndili ndi George Muhangu amene ali mu mzinda wa Blantyre mu dziko la Malawi. Chimene chikupangitsa kuti shuga azisowa ndi chani?
chomwe chikupangisa kuti shuga azisowa ndichonena kuti panopo ili ngati off season ya makampani a Irovo Sugar Malawi, kunena kuti sakutha kupanga shugayi okwanira chifukwa akukolola. Ndi akamaliza kukolola pameneno atayambeno sopano kugaya shugayi kuti azipezeka. Chinanso ndichonena kuti ma distributors amene akumakagula shuga kaya ndi ku Irovo kaya ndi kusalima shuga akumagulisa ku maiko akunja ngati Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Mozambique.
zochitika ndi madaphiri lolemba mpaka lachisanu pa nthawi ya 7 koloko kufikira 8 koloko madzulo pa Channel Africa.
Annika Longi sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons à présent dérouler notre tapis rouge pour accueillir notre personnalité du jour, l'artiste chanteur Sheky Frey, qui est en ligne de Guinée avec nous.
Je suis un artiste guinéen, un créateur, un styliste et je fais un peu ce qui plaît à mes fans. Voilà, c'est un peu ça, on a beaucoup de genres de trucs à faire, mais bon, pour le moment on est basé un peu sur le rap.
D'accord. À quelle période de votre vie avez-vous commencé à vous intéresser à la musique, Sheky?
Bon, je crois pas qu'il y ait une période, hein, parce que moi je suis un mélomane depuis mon petit âge.
Annika Longi, tous les dimanches.
Je crois pas qu'il y ait une période, hein, parce que moi je suis un mélomane depuis mon petit âge.
Annika Longi, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Africa in Song with Chanduko Ligege.
So when you think of African music, you think of Kwasa Kwasa, high life music from West Africa, Afrobeat from West Africa, of gospel music, or faith music, or spiritual music. But when we think of reggae music, we go to the Caribbean, and if it's Africa, we only think about Lucky Dube. Well, I'm here to introduce you to some reggae music from Africa. Salif Keita with Dakan Faye from Mali. And I must say, this one was a real shock for me because I never had imagined Salif Keita on a reggae beat. But listening to him, it just proved to me how versatile he is as an artist because you'd be expecting him to be on that vibe of West Africa, of ballads. But he really proved that he is very versatile, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Africa in Song with Chanduko Ligege. Channel Africa, where every moment is an African celebration. Feel the energy, feel the connection. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
SABC Sport brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful 5-part documentary series about the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting on the 13th of July at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2, tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache and the heroics that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere. No subscription needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk. Channel Africa, the best nighttime radio. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
Countries around the world, including South Africa, are closely monitoring developments out of the United States ahead of reciprocal tariff deadline tomorrow, the 1st of August. Washington has only announced 8 deals, including with the 27 European Union bloc, while countries like South Africa, India, Canada, Mexico and Australia are in a basket of countries that continue to engage with the United States for a new bilateral trade relationship. This week, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition put out a detailed statement affirming a period of intense negotiations with the United States since April. Engagements to refine a final trade framework agreement with Washington continue, with the tariff deadline now less than 24 hours away. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports from New York.
President Donald Trump's Liberation Day came and went on April 2nd, when the reciprocal tariffs were first announced. Then implementation delayed until July 9th. And then finally August 1st. Trump posting this letter on July 7th, announcing a 30% tariff on any and all South African products sent to the United States. On Wednesday, Trump asked about slapping India with a 25% tariff rate plus an additional penalty for what the USA views as unfair trade barriers, and a message for all BRICS nations.
We're negotiating right now, and it's also BRICS. You know, they have BRICS, which is basically a group of countries that are anti the United States, and India is a member of that, if you can believe it. It's an attack on the dollar, and we're not going to let anybody attack the dollar. So it's partially BRICS, and it's partially the trade situation. It's the deficit. We had a tremendous deficit. We'll see what happens. It doesn't matter too much whether we have a deal or whether we charge them a certain tariff, but you'll know at the end of this week.
The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition said in a statement this week that the proposed framework deal included proposals for $12 billion imports of U.S. liquefied natural gas over a decade, simplifying U.S. poultry exports and opening the South African market to U.S. blueberries, a commitment to invest $3.3 billion in U.S. industries such as mining and metals recycling, joint investments in critical minerals, pharmaceuticals and agri-machinery, in addition to exemptions for specific sectors such as shipbuilding and counter-seasonal agri-trade, among others. The country's top diplomat, Ronald Lamola, speaking in New York earlier this week.
As you will have been aware, there has been some non-disclosure agreements that has been signed with our Department of Trade and Industry. So there is ongoing engagements that is happening, and we want to give that a chance, and hopefully an agreement can be reached. But we will continue to engage with the U.S. because, as we've already always said, they are a very important strategic trading partner for South Africa. So the negotiations are very important. They're key to our economy, foreign direct investment, but also at the trade relations level. It's an important discussion that we are hopeful that there will be some agreement reached at some point.
In a Truth Social post, Trump said tariffs were making America great and rich again, saying the tide was turning and that America had successfully countered tariffs used against it, calling America the hottest country anywhere in the world. Or this post, after Canada announced it would recognize the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September, Trump saying the move would make it hard for them to make a trade deal with Canada, as the lines between politics and economy become increasingly blurred. Evidenced also in the threat of a 50% tariff against Brazil due to the coup charges faced by Trump's ally, former President Jair Bolsonaro. Listen to Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney.
These are complex, they're comprehensive, they're constructive negotiations with the Americans are ongoing. It's possible that they may not conclude by the 1st of August. But we'll see. The team's there. We're working hard. Conversations today, myself. So we'll see.
As a key U.S. cabinet secretary says Trump is in the driver's seat on tariffs. Listen to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick speaking on the Fox News Channel's special report.
The president is in the driver's seat now, right? He's done these big deals. He's got really all the cards in front of him. And as he said, he's going to decide what the tariff rate is. The president has proven his tariff policies are exactly correct and they work.
Professor Evandro Carvalho is an international law expert in Brazil.
Trump launches a rotating tariff machine gun indiscriminately and without good reasoning. This creates great insecurity for all companies and sectors that have commercial relations with the United States, so they are forced to seek new markets to diversify. So this instability imposed by the Trump administration on international trade creates this insecurity and will inevitably force countries to diversify their trading partners. Naturally, the U.S. is a formidable market, and no one wants to lose its market share, but this market needs to be relatively friendly.
Tariffs are essentially a tax on the goods imported from other countries. So US companies that purchase products or materials from abroad have to pay that tax to the US government. That means the additional cost, say between 10 and 50%, is either taken on by the importer or more likely passed on to the consumer. A third option, import fewer goods, which will in turn hurt the bottom line of exporters from other nations, and then finding a domestic manufacturer of the product in the US to circumvent the tariff completely, at least in theory. The Trump administration is banking on the latter, seeking to boost investments towards domestic manufacturing of imported goods, urging Americans to buy more American-made products while increasing tax revenues for the country. I'm Shervin Bryce Pease in New York.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk. Channel Africa, the best nighttime radio.
The Economic Community of West African States, better known as, or rather, I'm having to have a look at what we're looking for in actual fact. It's our package. We're crossing life. UNICEF, yes. Cholera outbreaks are surging across West and Central Africa, with children once again bearing the brunt. UNICEF warns that an estimated 80,000 children are at high risk as heavy rains, flooding and poor sanitation fuel the spread. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria are among the worst hit, with several neighboring countries also on high alert. Joining us on the line now is Claude Ngabu, a health specialist with UNICEF working in the region. Good evening, Claude.
Good evening. How are you?
All is well, thank you. Claude, how serious is the current cholera situation across West and Central Africa?
Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity. Just to let you know that the situation is at extremely high risk. The disease is spreading in a number of countries. And as you said, more than 80,000 of children are estimated to be at high risk of cholera in West and Central Africa region. As you said, the Democratic Republic of Congo is the most affected, followed by Nigeria, and there are several other countries that are also facing active epidemics, which include Chad, the Republic of Congo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Togo, while others, such as Niger, Liberia, Benin, Central Africa Republic, and Cameroon, are at close surveillance. So it's very important to mention that it's extremely at high risk, the disease in the region.
UNICEF estimates that 80,000 children are at high risk. What's making children so vulnerable in this outbreak?
Very important. Children face a high risk and are particularly vulnerable due to several interconnected factors, such as poor hygiene, inadequate sanitation, and access to safe water. And, smaller children have a high risk of dehydration. Then they can dehydrate much faster than adults, giving families and healthcare workers less time to intervene effectively. So it's very important to mention, finally, that, young children are particularly vulnerable due to the weakness of their immune system, leading to, increased morbidity and death.
The DRC has reported over 38,000 cases. What's the situation on the ground, especially in Kinshasa?
Yeah, the situation is very hard and it's big risk, especially in Kinshasa. The country has facing flooding and heavy rains during the last month, which affected water and sanitation system. The country is, experiencing mass floods over the past weeks. Many provinces have been affected with the heavy rainfalls, leaving to a million people living in need of assistance. There are intense floods, especially in Chassa, which have worsened the outbreak.
What are the key factors driving the outbreaks? Is it mostly flooding, poor sanitation, or something else, Claude?
Yes, those are some of the main reasons, but we can also highlight the fact that conflict combined with the population displacement, can leave people without access to clean water and basic sanitation. And, the health system, the impact on the health system, which have been overwhelmed with the healthcare gaps, delaying response times, and sometimes limited access to treatment in some specific area like rural areas. I talked about lack of access of clean water. It's important to highlight here that there are some underlying causes like malnutrition, especially among children under 5, increasing their vulnerability, as I was saying earlier, leading to increased death. Here, we'll close by saying that we cannot forget the impact of the climate change playing a key role in already fragile contexts, which leading to intensity of rainfalls and floodings.
Nigeria is also severely affected. Why do outbreaks keep recurring there?
Yeah, and cholera is known as endemic in Nigeria. It's spreading in many provinces and many states. Some of those reasons I have stated for DRC do also apply to Nigeria. And beside that, it's important that especially in the north, there is an issue with access to healthcare and population movement, which has increased in the last days the risk of cholera in Nigeria.
Mm. Now, what's the situation in Chad's refugee camps, and how is displacement making things worse?
Yeah, very important. In Chad, there have been some cases notified in the refugee camp. There are several camps in the East Chad, especially in Wadifira region. This is something which need to be taken into account here. The fact that those are refugees in camps, in some crowded camps, with the lack of hygiene and poor access to sanitation, those factors have led to cholera outbreak in Chad. We cannot forget the situation in Sudan, which has the border with the east part of Chad.
Are there signs of cross-border transmission between countries in the regions?
Yes, absolutely. There are some cross-border issues, and in our region we have some poor borders where people do travel from a country to another. This is very, very important to know that there are some cases notified in Togo, Ghana, which are closed to Nigeria. We cannot, link those cases directly to the case in Nigeria, but there are some risk factors. I would like here, especially highlight the case of Republic of Congo, which is very close to DRC, especially in Kinshasa. You know, the Congo River is at the border with the Republic of Congo and Democratic Republic of Congo, sharing the border. And as the disease is spreading along the Congo River, there were some suspect cross-border transmission between countries. Lastly, I would like to say, and especially the case of Angola, which is close to both DRC and the Republic of Congo, increasing the risk of cross-border transmission.
How is UNICEF responding? Can you talk about the focus areas like clean water, healthcare, and vaccines?
UNICEF is working with the government and in affected countries to ensure that the response is fully aligned with the national priorities and the country response plans. It's important to notice here that UNICEF is working on a multi-sectoral approach for the response, focused on some pillars. Some of them are water, hygiene, and sanitation, as we have already explained earlier. UNICEF is working on increasing access to clean water in affected areas, providing drinking water, water treatment kits, supporting sanitation infrastructures, distribution of safe water, provision of sanitation supplies, and good to notice that UNICEF is also working on the treatment, on the treatment of cholera cases, in supporting the establishment of cholera treatment centers, let's say cholera treatment units in some places with essential medical supplies like oral irritation, IV fluids, and antibiotics. In some cases, in some places, UNICEF do support deployment of medical staff and training of frontline workers in cholera case management. Our focus is also on the risk of communication and community engagement to make sure that the communities are fully aware of the disease and do adopt some measures, hygiene measures, and promotion behaviors in line with cholera. One component is vaccination support. UNICEF is working for the provision of oral vaccines through its supply division, and is supporting cholera vaccination campaigns with the rollout especially in high-risk zones. There are some interventions, including nutrition support. I was talking about the fact that it's important in some high malnutrition areas to ensure that there is a combined screening of and treatment of malnutrition to ensure that those interventions are fully included in cholera response efforts. Finally, UNICEF is working to ensure that the coordination mechanism, because this is one of the most important part of the response, it needs to be through a coordination mechanism, a coordination system, mainly under the Emergency Operations Center, National Emergency Operations Center, to ensure that data are collected, analyzed, and there is a rapid deployment of response team. There is attached to that the risk assessment of disease, where UNICEF can and do play a key role.
So you're appealing for $20 million. What would that funding help you deliver over the next few months?
UNICEF is appealing for $20 million to ensure that to ensure a rapid scale up of cholera response efforts, where I have already explained what UNICEF is doing on the field, but it needs to be rapidly increased and scale up, focusing on the most vulnerable population, especially children in affected countries. These interventions are fully oriented on areas like health, water, hygiene, and sanitation, risk communication, and community engagement to ensure that UNICEF is, targeting the high risk and most vulnerable population.
Now, what makes you believe that this outbreak can be contained, and what role can communities play?
Yeah, this outbreak can be contained. It's important to have some immediate priorities, immediate actions, while there is some long-term, mid-term, and long-term interventions. It's here important for a country, high country collaboration, increased collaboration between countries through cross-border collaboration. We already talked about the cross-border aspect. There is a need of strong collaboration between countries, sharing data and resources, increase the surveillance system, the early warning and the early action mechanism to detect and respond to new outbreaks. There is an action, a specific action, which is oriented to identifying the high-risk zones, the high-risk areas where it's important to intensify monitoring and the reporting system while working on other aspects. We talked about access to water and sanitation. We talked about distribution of kits. We talked about healthcare and treatment, ensure that health centers are fully operational. We talked about some prevention measures. This is one of the most important things to say here. Very important to increase prevention, the preparedness, the community engagement, the community awareness attached to the rollout of cholera vaccines to ensure the outbreak is contained.
Claude, thanks for joining us this evening to talk about this.
Thank you very much.
That was Claude Ngabu, a health specialist with UNICEF, speaking to us about the urgent cholera crisis unfolding across West and Central Africa.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
The United States was very vocal at the beginning of South Africa's G20 presidency, and this is largely due to strained relations with South Africa at the time, that they were not really keen on participating. Where do they stand right now?
The US is planning to take over the presidency of the G20 next year, and our understanding from them is that they intend to continue to do so, and therefore it is quite difficult then to be in a situation where you are not attending deputies' meetings or discussions during our presidency and then to take over the presidency next year. From a finance track perspective, there has been engagement. We've been working on a communique last week and this week here in Zimbabwe. What's important about that is that it's a consensus document. And so all the members in the room have to agree to the language that is used there. And our US colleagues have been part of those discussions and negotiations.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
The United States has decided to sanction the Palestine Liberation Organization and the Palestinian Authority. It has imposed sanctions that will deny visas to PLO members and Palestinian Authority officials. The US says it has reported the Palestinian groups to the Congress for initiating and supporting actions of the International Criminal Court and continue to support terrorism, incitement and glorification of violence. Meanwhile, a number of countries have indicated that they will recognize the state of Palestine. Bunolo Maribe has more.
It's a groundbreaking moment for the Palestinians after 15 countries have expressed their willingness to recognize the state of Palestine. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says they will recognize the Palestinian state if Israel doesn't end its military campaign in Gaza and commit to peace.
Our goal remains a safe and secure Israel,
alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state. But right now, that goal is under pressure like never before. I've always said that we will recognise a Palestinian state as a contribution to a proper peace process at the moment of maximum impact for the two-state solution. With that solution now under threat, this is the moment to act.
These countries intend to make their official declaration at the upcoming UN General Assembly in New York in September. The foreign ministries of Australia, Canada, Finland, France, Norway, Portugal and others have signed the New York Call statement. They have voiced their support for the two-state solution, an immediate ceasefire, release of hostages, and urged efforts to ensure unhindered humanitarian access. Director and Chief Executive of Chatham House, Bronwyn Maddox, says this is a significant move.
It is a symbol. It's one that doesn't have an immediate impact for the Palestinians, but it does say to Israel that Britain intends that to be the destination foreign policy and is committed to that and wants to rally the international community to that end. And it does give encouragement to those, including Palestinians and the moderates among Palestinians who are working to that end and still hope that it's more than a dream.
The UN General Assembly in May last year backed a Palestinian bid to become a full UN member by recognizing it as qualified to join. It also recommended the UN Security Council to reconsider the matter favorably. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says this must create feasible results.
Precisely because of the grim realities, we must do even more to realize the two-state solution. We must ensure that it does not become another exercise in well-meaning rhetoric. It can and must serve as a decisive turning point, one that catalyzes irreversible progress towards ending the occupation and realizing our shared aspiration for a viable two-state solution.
Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa called on all countries to recognize the state of Palestine without delay.
I salute the historic and courageous decision of France and President Macron to recognize the state of Palestine in September, and call on all those that have yet to do so to recognize the state of Palestine without delay. Indeed, the path to peace starts with recognizing the state of Palestine and preserving it from destruction.
Meanwhile, aid trucks carrying food, medicine and other essential supplies have headed towards Gaza from Egypt's Rafah crossing. Gaza's food stocks have been running low since Israel cut off all supplies to the territory in March. I'm Bonolo Maribe, SABC News.
G20 member countries have adopted a declaration at the Labour and Employment Ministerial meeting at George in the Western Cape to reduce inequality and empower youth and women. This declaration builds on the Brisbane goals at the G20 summit, which took place in Australia in 2014. The Brisbane to eThekwini goal aimed to reduce the gender gap in labour by 2030. The Nelson Mandela Bay target was also adopted to reduce the youth unemployment by 5% in the next 5 years. Segri Chetty reports.
The George leg of the G20 Employment Working Group meeting once again highlighted the role of youth and women in the labour market, as well as the importance of raising minimal wages globally. Delegates have now adopted a declaration for global labour issues. The Department of Employment and Labour acknowledged the process has been uneven in trying to make good on the 2014 Brisbane goal, which adopted the commitment to reduce the gender gap in labour force participation by 25% by 2025. The department said that while nearly all G20 countries have narrowed the gap since 2012, only about half are on track to meet the target by next year. Luke Triangle, General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, said their priorities remain focused on the youth.
Many of young people, when they enter the labor markets, they are faced with informal work. They are faced with precarious contracts, and that needs to change. Well, we need to give a good future to young people with good contracts, with good employment conditions, and with good wages. women participation in the labor market, we are lacking behind. We need to increase women participation in the labor market and also at good conditions. So equal pay for work of equal value is also one of the priorities that we put forward as International Trade Union Confederation.
Norway's Deputy Minister of Labour and Social Inclusion, Kjetil Vavle, said all the sessions and discussions were eye-opening.
We have a lot of things to learn from the South Africa presidency when it comes to labour and employment. I think that we have to think, I think we have a lot in common when it comes to also everything from platform economy to how to reduce the pay gap between men and women. I think also in South Africa I've learned that it's also a big informal sector that the presidency and the government now is working to get into the formal sector of the labour market.
South Africa's labour attaché in Geneva, Siyabonga Khadebe, said the declaration sets a clear agenda for decent work and lives by reducing inequality and empowering youth and women.
We are hoping that at the end of the day, the entire South African G20 presidency can achieve what we've achieved. But these are just baby steps. We still have a long way to go, because these outcomes that we've attained here in George, we are taking them up to Johannesburg for the Leaders Summit in November.
That was South Africa's Labour Attaché in Geneva, Siyabonga Khadebe, ending that report by Segri Chetty in George.
Channel Africa, where every moment is an African celebration. Feel the energy, feel the connection. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrada com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Thanks for listening to Channel Africa. Africa World Hour comes to an end for today, and I'll be back again tomorrow. Up next, Hotlines.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo.